special lecture and very brief introduction of intellectual property. There are several services which Intellectual Property Act recommended for business. There are several services are recommended for business or for any affair to get your intellectual property protected. The services are recommended for business like licensing, brand name registration, patent registration, trademark registration, industrial design registration, copyrights registration, unfair competition, anti-counterfeiting, franchising, trade secrets, data protection, domain names, market survey and research. So these are the services which are recommended for the business purposes in intellectual property scenario. Intellectual property laws, which we call IP laws, there are several different intellectual property laws, like Copyright Ordinance 1962, Registered Design Ordinance 2000, Registered Layout Design of Integrated Circuit Ordinance 2000, Patent Ordinance 2000, Trademarks Ordinance 2001, Mercantile Market Act 1889, the Trademarks Invalidation and Summary Registration Act 1950, the Electronic Transaction Ordinance 2002, sections relating to infringement of trade, property and other marks in the PPC, Pakistan Penal Code 1860, Press, Newspapers, News Agencies and Book Registration Ordinance 2002. So these are the basically intellectual properties laws, and these are basically the concerned with the intellectual property matters. Intellectual properties rights in Pakistan are in different scenario, and so many intellectual properties are protected in Pakistan. So Pakistan is a signatory of World Trade Organization, WTO, which aims to increase international trade. Under the provisions of this agreement, all states which subscribe to WTO become bound to a mutual recognition of intellectual property rights at a higher level of protection that the older conventions could offer. Pakistani intellectual property laws take into account the provision of WTO. Pakistan is a signatory to the Berne Convention for the Protection of Literacy and Artistic Work of 1886 and the Universal Copyright Convention of 1952, an agreement on trade-related aspect of intellectual property rights 1995, which normally calls TRIPS. Another way in which you can find the intellectual property rights are protected in Pakistan, that the PPC provides, by Pakistan Penal Code, provides punishment under section 478 and to 489 against infringement of trade, property and other marks. This shows both international and national ramification of intellectual properties law. Owner of the exclusive license of copyrights in case of an infringement or otherwise owner of owner of the exclusive license of copyrights in case of an infringement are entitled to all such remedies by way of injunctions, damages, accounts, and otherwise as are conferred by law for the infringement of a right. Similarly, the holder of a valid patent in Pakistan shall have the right to prevent the third parties not having owner's consent from the acts of making, using, offering for sale, selling, or importing, and having the right to assign or transfer by succession the patent and to conclude licensing contract. Further, ownership policy principles. So we quickly cover this area. This is a very important area for intellectual property. That what are the ownership policy principles in our country? All rights and titles in intellectual property devised or created by an employee and a student of the university in the course of his or her duties and activities of employment shall belong automatically to the university and are subject to his policy. This, however, excludes articles, dissertation, theses, and books which are produced solely by one or more student employee of university in performance of the research agreement. Here we will discuss the ownership policy principles relating with the university and students, because so many, creative work is being done in the universities. So these are the principles which needs to be followed and observed. If the university's resources are used and the funding is generated from any external sources, university shall be the owner of any intellectual property thus guaranteed. Further, we will finally we should have to talk about the trial and offences. How the trial takes place and what are the offences. So an accused shall be tried and prosecuted for an offences. An accused shall be tried and prosecuted for an offence in the tribunal, and the case shall be heard from day to day and shall be disposed of within 90 days. This is important to note, that an accused shall be tried and prosecuted for an offence in the tribunal, and the case shall be heard from day to day and shall be disposed of within 90 days. Powers of the tribunals included that the tribunal shall exercise of its civil jurisdictions, have all the powers vested in civil court under the Code of Civil Procedure 1908, which we call CPC, Act of 5 of 1908. The tribunal shall exercise of its criminal jurisdiction, try offences made punishable under this ordinance, and shall have the same powers as are vested in Court of Session under the Code of Criminal Procedure 1898. So under the CRPC, Code of Criminal Procedure 1898, Act of 5, 1898, the tribunal shall exercise of its criminal jurisdiction. All proceedings before the tribunal shall be deemed to be judicial proceedings within the meaning of Section 193 or 228 of the Pakistan Penal Code, Act 15 and 29 of 1916. So therefore, we can say that all proceedings before the tribunal shall be deemed to be judicial proceedings within the meaning of Section 193 and 228 of the PPC, Pakistan Penal Code. So this was the special lecture I have designed for the understanding of intellectual property rights and intellectual property acts prevailing in Pakistan. Thank you very much.